Well, hello everybody. This is a very exciting moment. Welcome to the first interview, the first thing of the Mick Sterling Experience podcast. I am Mick Sterling. This is the fancy schmancy logo that Charlie Peterson created to be behind me as we start this new venture in 2021. What's the objective of this podcast? I guess for me, it's like basically four things. Is it interesting? Does it move me? Is it good? And do the things I know what I know, and when I don't know it, I get somebody else to talk about it or do it. And those four things, I think, as long as those four things are involved, I think we are in a good position to be presenting a lot of interesting things that we hope that you can stick around with us and enjoy off and on through your busy lives. So this is the first interview, the first thing that we're doing on the Mick Sterling Experience podcast, and I am really, really honored and thrilled and great to have my friend that I've worked with for, I don't know, at least over 20 years as my first guest on the podcast, Kevin Bowe, who is just one of the leading producers and mixers and songwriters and performers in the Twin Cities, and has national connections with all kinds of great artists. And Kevin's going to be joining me for the hour, and we're going to be talking about the things that Kevin and I talk about, which is sometimes
not all of them.
Who knows? Not all. Welcome, Kevin. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, Kevin and I think our first introduction, at least that I can remember, that we actually worked together was a project that I did back in the mid-'90s called Artists for Camp Heartland, and you contributed a song. We were working with Emmanuel Kiriakou and Rob Arthur at that time, and Jeff Arundel, who helped us produce this record, and you contributed a song called Sweeter World, and that's the first introduction I think I had to your music.
Yeah, didn't we do some live performance too with it?
I was thinking about that. I don't think that we did with that album. I think we did some kind of an event, but I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if there was a live.
I remember something like an unplugged version we did, but it was quite a few of us on stage. I remember it because the guy running sound, I won't mention his name, I was horsing around during sound check, and he he upbraided me. He scolded me in front of everyone, and I remember thinking, well, that's unnecessary. But then later I remember thinking, you know what? He's right. I was ruining his sound.
Listen, this is a family show. Watch your language with the horsing around stuff too, okay? Let's get it together. Get it together, man. I was thinking about, for somebody that's been doing it as long as I have, I think about, what's the first thing, like for me when I was a kid, it was the Monkees. What
really?
That really got me. Like I used to sing at, there's an old newspaper clip of Yonkers Park Newsletter when I was like 6, and I stood on the picnic tables and I sang Monkey songs with my Monkees guitar that I was nothing, and I just had the guts and the balls to do that when I was 6. But the Monkees for me were like, that's why I wanted to start. The Monkees and Ray Charles for me, which is an interesting combination. But what was it for you? What was the first thing that really made you want to do what you're doing?
Well, my first thing was the Who live at Leeds.
That's way cooler than mine, by the way. I hate you so much right now.
Why?
That's way cooler than mine.
No, listen, don't get me wrong. I love the Monkees so much. I just ordered the book about Boyce and Hart. They're
really?
Songwriters. Yeah, because I'm the world's biggest Monkee fan, so don't get me wrong. But when I was 13, my neighbor had Live at Leeds, and he played on their stereo all the time, and I was fascinated with the album artwork and everything. And I was fascinated with the guitar player, Pete, because he wasn't an attractive man, but I got the impression that he had lots of girlfriends. And I thought, that's for me.
Yeah, interesting. Well, he certainly had,
That record is a perfect record to learn how to play guitar to because, A, it's live, so there's, not a million overdubs and things. 2, he's a very blocky kind of simple guitar player. He's a great guitar player, but he's not like doing jazz rock fusion stuff. And so you can kind of figure it out. And then number 3, the way that record is mixed, it's kind of strange. The drums and the vocals are up the middle, okay? And then the bass is on the right channel, and the guitar is on the left channel. So if you pan your Pioneer receiver over to the left channel, you have mostly just Pete Townsend playing guitar live. And then you can kind of figure out, that's how I learned how to play guitar.
So to me, that would seem like a very difficult artist to learn how to play guitar from.
No, because he's brilliant, but he's not complicated.
Okay.
It's hard to learn how to play guitar from listening to, some jazz rock fusion album or Journey or something like that, where they're all, like I went to Berkeley and tapping and all this, overdubs and crazy stuff. But
yeah.
Pete Townsend is just like rock. And so I knew I wanted a Les Paul. I remember I saw them on their last tour with Keith Moon. I have pictures from it, actually.
Wow.
And it reinforced my belief in him as the greatest guitar player, because he was kind of into an industrial thing at the time. He was wearing that white flight suit with army boots, and he was playing all Les Pauls, and they all looked exactly the same, except for they had big numbers printed on them, like 1, 2, 3, 4. He had like 6 of them. Okay. And when he wanted to switch guitars, he would look at the guitar tech on stage left where he was, and he'd go like that. Yeah. And the guy would throw number 3 out on the stage, and he'd catch it and start playing him. And again, I was like, that's
pretty cool.
It was pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. Wow. So live at Leeds, what other, and for me, Ray Charles, Modern Sounds in Country and Western, Born to Run, James Brown Live at the Apollo, pivotal albums, Captain Fantastic, John.
We meet there.
Yeah. So I mean, what were some of the other pivotal albums in your life that formed who you are?
Well, the first album I ever bought, I didn't know anything about music, but I liked the feeling of this record store head shop where I grew up. Yeah. And I went in there and I just bought a record because I liked the cover, and it turned out to be Taj Mahal's Ooh So Good and Blues record.
Yeah.
And I loved it, fell in love with it. And back then, KQRS wasn't a formatted station. Yeah. It was kind of like what the Current wants you to think it is now. The Current actually does have a playlist, and they have, scientists,
sure,
telling you what to play and stuff like that. Which, I mean, almost all radios like that now. It's not it just is what it is.
Yeah.
But back then, KQ was just a DJ who was probably high, playing whatever records they wanted to play. And they played Taj Mahal. So I bought this record, and I really liked it. And I still have that record. And the second record I ever bought was There Goes Ryman Simon.
Yeah, go.
So that's, I mean, every song is perfect.
Talk about your, my time in record stores when I was a kid, was so special to me. Spending time at, there was a place in Robbinsdale called Wax Museum, and the original Down in the Valley when it was, across from where the police station was before where it is now. But, just spending time in record stores, just perusing everything at that time it's very romanticized in my brain, but I think it's probably a good idea that it's romanticized because it was pretty romantic.
Well, I think there's some facts behind that, some evidence behind that, because now music is, in some ways, it's great that any song you hear about, you can go grab it for free anytime you want. But back then, music was something that you had to save up money for and go and obtain and make hopefully a wise choice. That's one thing that I think made it more special, because anything is more special if it's harder to obtain.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I think was the physical size of albums and the artwork.
So
and if
great.
you grew up like I did in a sheltered suburban, cultural wasteland, these records were, the pictures were like a door into another world. A good example would be the third record I ever bought, which is Captain Fantastic. When you look at that cover,
oh yeah,
don't you just want to go there?
Well, exactly. It's very almost famous-ish, that scene when the sister leaves the albums underneath young Cameron Crowe's bed. And he's just a kid. He's a suburban kid. How could you possibly think of a world like that? When I think of that with Springsteen, when I heard Born to Run, it's like, I live in Crystal, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
What is this world that I'm being exposed to through these lyrics? It was a whole other world.
a whole other world, and I was dying to get out of the world that I was in. And so bands that had the, for lack of a better word, mythology behind them, Led Zeppelin is a great example. You know, like you feel like, or Jimi Hendrix, you feel like, well, they are definitely not from here.
That's it. They're not space aliens, but they're damn close to it. It's like,
Exactly.
what is this thing they're talking about? Talk about, I know that your fondness and influence of Paul Westerberg to you is really important and played a huge role, at least from my perspective, in the songs that you write, what you hear, what you decide to make your songs sound like. To me, it's not it's not a thing where you're copying him by any, but
it totally is.
You're definitely, well, I think some people borrow from their influences really well. And I think that, to me, that's what you've done with Westerberg to me. So talk about how important Westerberg is to who you are and your time working with him.
Well, I think I was one of those people demographically. I was born in 1961, and so I wasn't technically a baby boomer, but I'm not a Gen Xer either.
Yeah.
And it's like this lost generation. And so when I was in junior high, like I was saying, the radio was great because they'd play Led Zeppelin into Joni Mitchell into, Muddy Waters, and just there's no rules, no boundaries.
Yeah.
But then in 1976, all FM rock radio pretty much switched over to AOR format, and it was the advent of what they now call corporate rock, whereas a lot of bands, it was just a lot smarter, for lack of a better word, and more contrived or controlled and come up music. I always say these bands were more formed in boardrooms, not in garages and basements.
Yeah.
And I really, really disliked it and felt alienated from it. And it was a bad time in my life because I had a severe drug problem at the time. So bands like Journey and Foreigner, I'm able to appreciate a little of what they do now. But at the time, I just loathed it. And
I did too.
hated the radio.
But you knew all the songs. You loathed them, but you knew because you couldn't escape it. It was all around you.
Because you can't escape it.
Yeah, it was all around you.
Yeah. So
that's funny.
I was this person who was ripe for punk rock because in 1979 I graduated high school and they popped me into rehab and I met this kid who played me the Ramones' first album and I was like, I remember my first impression is, I'm confused. Why are these people trying to play bad? And then my second question is, why do I love this and why do I want to keep hearing it? I don't get it. It's not good, but I love it. It was
Right.
literally, I'm not joking. I was really confused because I'd been fooled into this mentality of like that you had to be quote unquote good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then, but I didn't like music that's quote unquote good. It didn't move me like Live at Leeds did.
And that's the key word, isn't it? The moving part. It's such a mysterious thing. What moves you? It could be anything, and it moves you into you personally.
What moves me is a sense of inclusiveness rather than exclusiveness. When I see a band like Journey, my impression is that they're on stage a million miles away and there's holograms of unicorns and there's barbed wire and dogs in front of the stage and you can't get close and they're up there doing this going, we are better than you. Uh-huh. You will never be able to play like this. And they're right. They are better than me. And I will never be able to play like that. But I heard the Ramones and there's this thing of like, hey, go buy a cheap guitar. In 3 months, you'll be able to play Beat on the Brat with a baseball bat. That's fun.
Yeah.
And I love that about it. So after I got out of rehab, they put me into this halfway house, a really strict place downtown. And I got out of my little suburban bubble. And there was some people in the house that were super into punk rock, and I got to be friends with them. And when I finally got out of that place, I was in there for 7 months.
That's a long stint.
They asked me to be in their band. And so that band was called the Dads, and we were awful, kind of halfway between punk and new wave. Just really without merit as a band, but it was super fun. And we would go play the Longhorns before there was a 7th Street entry.
A band without merits. You should have used that for your PR for a band without merit.
A band without merit. And I stand by that. Yeah, right. So we would play at the Longhorn, and I even have posters of the Replacements opening for us. a couple of times, and then
sure.
the gap began. But I was fascinated with the Replacements because, again, I was like, trying to figure out why do I love this so much, and that's when I first realized it's not the music, it's the songwriting.
Yeah.
I was always focused on like who's the best guitar player and blah 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 blah. But with Paul, we got to be friends, and I remember asking him kind of bashfully one time, because he can be very cutting. I was like, "How do you write those songs?" And he looked at me. This is like 1981, and he said, "You're a funny guy, Kevin. You should learn to write just like you talk." And it took me 10 years to figure out what he was talking about. But once I did, things started taking off. So we were friends for a while, and then his career took off and mine didn't. And I didn't see him. I'd listened to the records.
Right.
Wow. And it was just really my favorite band, my favorite band. Because a lot of punk rock was based on shock value. And some of the Replacements, I guess, was based on shock value, but I never really cared about like how drunk Bob was at the gig or anything like that. I cared about the songs and his voice. And then we ended up working together much later after I'd already had some success writing and producing other artists. I ended up doing a 2-month U.S. tour with him and producing a couple of records. And then I even played guitar on I hate to call it a Replacements reunion, but it was that Songs for Slim thing. Yeah. Where it was Tommy and Paul and me and my old drummer, Peter Anderson.
I'm sure there had to be some type of surreal moment. I don't know if it was the first gig or maybe it was the first rehearsal of performing in that band with Paul, but that had to be pretty powerful for you.
It was. It was Dickensian. Let me say it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. These are songs that meant more to me, in my life, probably than any song I've ever written.
Yeah.
But I also realized something about myself. We went out on that tour, and after 2 weeks, I remember looking at a set list for the night's gig, and kind of inside myself, I was going, and here's all these songs, Aching to Be and IOU and all these things that are just so, my favorite songs of all time. And I was like, well, we just played these last night. And I started to realize I'm not, the thing I like about the studio and being a writer and producer is like, you do it and then you're done and you move on to the next thing.
Yes.
Even though I loved those songs, I don't want to say it's boring, but it's more interesting for me to finish something and then move on to the next thing. It's kind of like that Joni Mitchell live album. You know what I'm talking about? Where she goes, she's trying to play her new stuff off of Court and Spark. And the audience is like, Big Yellow Taxi, play Big Yellow Taxi. And she's up there and she says the greatest thing. She says, this is such a weird thing to do for a living because, like, nobody ever went to Van Gogh and said, hey, I love Starry Night. Paint that one again.
Well, and I think it must be so, being in music, being a very, very successful artist, it's different than any other profession. You don't go to a mechanic and go, fix the car the way you did when you first started fixing cars. You've been doing this for 30 years. You've got all kinds of experience, but I don't want you to do that. I want you to do it when you barely knew what you were doing. Fix it like that. That makes me feel more comfortable.
It's true. Success can be a cage of your own making as an artist. And I think I know you really well, and I know that you love performing. You love it. Yeah. When the people are clapping and they're going nuts and stuff like that, you come alive in a way that, that's the only thing that'll do that for you, to you. And I'm not that person. I don't know if it's because I didn't have any success in music until I was a bit older, or because of growing up with punk rock. But when I'm up there on stage, there's always a part of me that's going, I don't care what you people think.
Yeah.
And that's not good for being a live performer. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with live performances. I quit performing live 5 years ago, and I haven't for one day, for 1 minute, missed it.
But, I would propose that is almost kind of part of your charm on stage. There are people like me that are gleefully, love being on stage, and it's very obvious. But your, I wouldn't say disdain, but it's certainly not. I could sense there would be something else you would prefer doing at that particular time.
Westerberg said that he said, I said, how come you picked me for this gig? And he said, Kevin, it's your studied arrogance. I will say, though, when you're talking about that charm, I have as yet been able to monetize that charm. So it might be in the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah.
But I much prefer the studio where you make something and then the next day you go make a new thing.
Yeah. Go back, you've talked about being in rehab before, and you and I through the years have talked about it, and, sparingly. But you definitely made a break. When you decided that you needed to be sober, what instigated that when you finally said, this is enough? And I don't want to know what you did. I'm just thinking, what was that? What instigated that to turn you into the person you are now, where you said, I can't do this anymore?
Well, I didn't decide I needed to be sober. They decided I needed to be sober.
Okay. They society or they family?
They meaning anyone who'd ever come into contact with me in my entire life.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
They were very judgy about it. They were very, very harsh.
Yeah.
It was very hurtful. Still to this day, I question whether I really had a problem.
Yeah.
I think I was in high school as a senior, and again, I was in a really bad place because, number one, music wasn't thrilling me. New music wasn't thrilling me like it had. I felt abandoned by my jams. I was only buying old records. Yeah. And then drugs weren't working as well for me either, because the trick about drugs, and don't get me wrong, I'm not an anti-drug person. I love drugs. Drugs are the best. But drugs are also a trick. If you're an addict like me, I had this great time for the first couple of years I was doing drugs. I mean, it was the best. I will never have that much fun without working for it ever again in my life. But then it stops working, and so the obvious answer is to take more drugs, and then that doesn't work. Yeah. And then obvious answer is to take harder, different drugs, and that doesn't work. And so you're chasing your tail trying to get back to this original feeling that you can never get back to. So when I was a senior in high school, I was really depressed because music wasn't doing it for me like it did, and drugs weren't doing it for me like we did. And so then they did a classic, intervention. They call my name on the intercom. I go to the principal's office or whatever, and there's all these people sitting around a table. And I was a dope fiend, but I wasn't an idiot. I knew what it was. Yeah. And I decided when I walked in that room that I would go. But they went around the table and did their thing. Well, you lied about this, and you stole that from me, and you blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah. And then they got to the professional intervention guy who was built like a tank and strategically positioned right next to the door. They couldn't legally make me go because I was 18 and I had never gotten caught by the cops. So he goes, well, the way I see it, Kevin, you just don't have a choice. And that's the first words I said. I said, hold on. I do have a choice because you got nothing legal on me. Yeah. I said, I'll go, but I'm taking credit for the decision. I'm going because I decided to go, not because you decided. Again, the studied arrogance. Sure. So then the guy goes, okay, great. We have a bed waiting for you right now. And I was like, oh, now, right now. And I realized that big fat joint I had smoked on the way to school that day was it. Yeah. And that was the beginning of it. I remember being in rehab, and the first question I had for my counselor was like, okay, how long do I have to stay sober before I can prove to you I don't have a problem so I can go get high? And she's like, and I wasn't being funny. It was like, that was a serious question.
Seems like a legitimate question, sure.
Yeah, and she was like, do you hear yourself? And I was like, well, okay, whatever. And then a couple of days later, I said to the same woman, I said, okay, I'm starting to get the hang of this. This might be good for me because, for my profession, I'm a drug dealer. And one of the main things that's hurt my business is that I do so many of the drugs. So if I was sober and I was doing this, my profit margin would soar. And she's like, again, do you hear yourself?
Right. Well, as you're talking about this, you're even as someone that was doing drugs, you're searching for things. You're searching for a better drug. You're searching for something that is going to make you feel better. But in essence, you're searching. I'm wondering if there's a bridge to that. Is maybe you never even thought about this, and maybe it means nothing. But you were searching for something. Is that a part of the recipe of you producing? Is that what
is the recipe?
What are the things that when you decide to produce an artist, or when you hear something that you think that you can make better or enhance, what is that thing that's inside you that thinks you can do that, and that you're the person to do it?
Well, I think you nailed it. It is searching, and I guess the way I feel about it is, I grew up in a pretty bad family situation, so I'm not one of those people who just believes. I remember a therapist told me once, there's a lot of people out there who think, in the end, everything's going to turn out all right. She goes, "You're not one of those." And she's like, and I was like,
do you hear what
right.
you're saying right now?
What's that?
Do you hear what you're saying?
Yeah, right. She said, "You're not one of those people who believes everything's going to turn out all right." So I wasn't raised to believe like I just deserve to be here.
Yeah.
Like I can just show up and it's like I have worth as a person. So I think my favorite thing about songwriting or producing, especially songwriting, is that I love the process and everything, but my favorite thing is when you're done and you have that thing that you've created out of nothing.
Yes.
And then for a minute, I get this relief, just like I used to with drugs, where it's like everything's okay for a minute.
Yeah, that's I'm gonna use that as in the show business. We're gonna make that a hell of a segue right now, because we want to do a couple of your songs through this hour that we have, and I want people to hear the first song that introduced you and I together, "Sweeter World."
Right.
From back in the mid '90s. But so this is a song called "Sweeter World" by Kevin Bowe.
It's funny because if you listen to the lyrics, this is exactly what we were just talking about.
Oh, really? Okay.
Before they get any older,
That was great to hear again. It's been a long time.
It's been a really long time.
Yeah.
All I could think of when I was listening to it is I'm listening to it as a producer engineer now, which I wasn't back then,
Yeah.
and listening to all the stuff that Tom Tucker did because he mixed that.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting too, listening to that guitar solo. How
Andy D.
Is that Andy? That's Andy. Wow. The fact that you chose to not take it another 8 bars, to me, was a really smart choice. Like I would have been fine hearing it longer, but the fact that you didn't take it longer is, to me, that's a part of a great songwriter, knowing when to get out and when to, It's
funny. I get out quicker now.
Yeah.
Because one thing I did on that song that I used to do all the time is I wrote a third verse, and I rarely write a third verse now.
Yeah.
That song's 3 minutes and 53 seconds long, and I don't write songs that long. I once in a while, but very, very rarely.
Yeah. Kevin,
no third verse.
Let's talk about the people that you've worked with. There's so many. Just recently, Communist Daughter and Joanne Parker and things like that. And then back, when we first met, you really introduced Johnny Lang to the cities and the world. And talk about those things that when you find an artist, what is that thing that makes you want to work with that particular artist?
Well, there's a lot of different reasons. I mean, so the things that make you want to work with an artist are not in order. Do I think it'll be fun? Do I think it'll be profitable? Do I think it's artistically groundbreaking and amazing? And not to be crass, but how busy am I?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if I'm not busy, hell, I'll work with anybody. But I've been super busy for a long time, so that hasn't been as much of a factor. Yeah. But I know inside myself, I know no matter how snooty I think I am, if I wasn't busy, this is what I do. I'm not, a hobbyist. I do this to put food on the table. So,
sure.
This morning I mixed a car dealership commercial.
Okay.
But the funny thing is, the older I've gotten, like you'd think that after working with people like Johnny Lang or Etta James or whatever, I'd be like, I have to do a car commercial, and I'm kind of, a pissy attitude about it. But nothing could be further from the truth, because I've spent most of my time making cool records with people. When I get a jingle gig, I'm like, well, this is interesting.
Well, and it's a whole different animal too. I mean,
totally different animal.
When I have done jingles, and I think of, how do these people write these songs? And it is such an amazing art form to take somebody's business concept and turn it into a catchy 30-second or minute song. That is such a discipline. I don't know how that even happens.
I barely know, but I got this gig, so I did it. The toughest thing is what you just mentioned. It has to time out exactly to 30 seconds. So you got to get creative with the editing. That's why sometimes you listen to like they use somebody else's song on a TV commercial, and there's weird edits in it, like they cut out half the chorus, and you hear that, and that's all so that it fits. You know what I mean? Because the music is a slave to the picture and the voiceover.
Yeah,
and so they get really creative. Sometimes poorly so, because there's like, oh, that's interesting. They used this James Taylor song, but they only used like a bar of 7.
You talk about the business of music, and you with Johnny and Etta and Tommy Castro and so many people. Give everybody just a minute or so of the business of what you do. To get songs on films, get songs on television shows, to get songs on, there is what you've done. I think is interesting, but people don't know how that works. How do you get your song on the end of The Sopranos, and when that happened with Blues Is My Business, things like that? How does that happen?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I can give the universal overview, because there's a million different ways to get it to happen. But
I want the universal overview.
Is a good example of how it can work when it does work.
Yeah.
And I've got to keep in mind that if you do what I do for a living, it's kind of like being a baseball player. Like the best hitters in baseball, usually they don't, like you're a if you're a good hitter, a 350 is a good batting average,
7 out of 10.
That means 6.5 out of 10 times you don't get on base.
That's right.
It's like, wow, you're awesome.
Yeah.
Well, most of the time you're not awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but that song, Blues Is My Business, is a great story of how it can work when it does work. I was doing a writing trip to Nashville because I had signed my first publishing deal with Lieber and Stoller Music, and they said, we're going to send you to Nashville to co-write. And I'm like, say what? Because I'd never co-written a song in my life.
Sure.
But, it was terrifying at first. But I figured it out, and people were nice to me and took care of me. And I ended up writing with this guy named Todd Cerny, who's a very nice guy. He's passed away since from cancer, but super nice guy, just really a sweetheart. And he had written for Cheap Trick and some other people like that and some country stuff.
Oh, okay.
And he was kind of a producer too. And he had this title, The Blues Is My Business and Business Is Good, which he had gotten from that Megadeth album title, Killing Is Our Business and Killing Is Good.
Oh, that's fantastic. I had no idea about that.
And I heard that title, and he knew that I had cuts with Johnny Lang and blues things. So he's like, I've been saving this blues title. Let's write that. And I was like, yeah. And it was such a strong, so much of it is how good is the title, how good is the idea. I wrote most of the lyric for that in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Because, a title like that is so good. All you're doing
is
like a coloring book. You're just coloring in, with the picture that the guy already has. So we wrote it. We made a good demo of it. And then, did you cut that first or did Etta?
I cut it first. And because honestly, this was one of my greatest, my greatest stories that you've ever told me. Was that you told me that Etta heard my version and asked if I was white or black.
I do remember that. I do remember that.
I'm keeping that forever.
It was so long ago, I'd forgotten.
I'm keeping that story forever and going to tell everybody.
So that's a good part of the story. Because you recorded the song with a great vocal on it, that helps sell the song.
Yeah.
If we had a demo of it and I was singing it, I don't know if she would have been able to hear it. Maybe, but less likely. Yeah. So then Etta James cuts it. Album comes out. She was at a point in her career where she was no longer selling huge numbers of albums, but there's a lot of buzz about it. And then it won the Grammy for Best Blues Record, which a Grammy for Best Blues Record is like a Christmas card from your rich uncle with no money in it. But again, people think it's cool.
Yes.
So then the music supervisor at The Sopranos hears the song, and they used it. At that point in time, The Sopranos was the biggest show on TV.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
And they used it. What determines how much you get paid for a sync license like that is what it's called, sync for synchronization, synchronizing music to film or TV.
Yeah.
Is how long does it play? How bad do they want it? And are people talking over it? So the best place you can get a song is over end titles while they're rolling the titles.
Yeah.
And they played the whole song.
My
whole song over the end title. And it was a huge licensing fee, which I didn't get all the money because I co-wrote it with a guy.
Sure.
And I had a publishing deal. And the record was released on RCA. So RCA gets half the money because they own the master.
Okay.
The other half is split between me and co-writer dude. But then of my half, 25% of that went to my publisher, even though they didn't do anything to get it used. The music supervisor at Sopranos had just heard it and said, yeah, we should use this. So then one of the guys that was on The Sopranos is little Steven Van Zandt.
Yeah.
He had a recurring, pretty big role on it.
Yeah, Sylvia.
And he heard the song because it was used on the show, and he filed it away in his little Stevie mind.
Yeah.
And 2 or 3 years ago, he made a solo record, and he did his own version of it. And nobody ever even told me. A friend of mine who's a big Springsteen fan said, "Little Steven just cut your song." And I'm like, I don't think so.
You weren't told?
Goes, yeah, Google it.
Oh, my God. That's amazing.
I know. So I Google it, and I'm like, oh, hell yes, this is cool. So then I went on Twitter, and I DM'd Little Steven, and he got right back to me and said, I love that song. Dude, that's so great. And it's my wife's favorite song on the album. And his wife got on the DM, and she's like, oh, my God, you're so cool. This song is so great. And then he came and did a show here in Minneapolis, and he put me on the list, and I got to meet him, and he's the nicest guy ever. So in the meantime now, between those two things happening, at least 100, and I'm not exaggerating, like bar bands, bluesy bar bands in the United States, full of old fat white guys playing blues at a corner bar, cut their own versions of that song. None of them ever licensed it. Don't
Yeah.
make a dime. And I don't really care because,
Yeah.
I mean, I would have got like maybe $100 for each one, whatever.
Yeah.
You go,
Yeah,
blues
Go use
bands.
it. Yeah,
Steal my song. I don't care.
Yeah.
But so I got to be friends with Little Steven and his wife. And when I put out my last record of my own stuff with the Okima Prophets, I sent it to them, and she fell in love with one of the songs, and so did he. And so they put it on his Little Steven's Underground Garage show.
Oh, wow.
As the coolest song in the world this week, which means they put it in rotation, they play it, they interview me on the radio. Super nice people. And I still thought, okay, great. 50 old dudes who love the Replacements will buy my record now, whatever. But I had been told by this lawyer guy I knew that I had to sign up for Sound Exchange. It's not like BMI. It's not like this. You got to sign up for Sound Exchange. And since he was a lawyer, I didn't listen to him and I didn't do it. But then right before I put out that album, the Prophets album, I did do it just because, like, I'm an adult now. I should get it. It's a super pain in the ass. You got to, put these codes in and what style it is. It takes forever. It's a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Nothing in my life makes me more angry than an Excel spreadsheet.
My hatred for Excel sheets is legendary.
Because they make me feel stupid.
I don't get it. How does this work?
Exactly. So I did it, though, and then I started getting these checks from Sound Exchange direct deposited in my account. And at first I thought it was a mistake, and I was like, well, I'm not going to tell them. The first check was like $3,500, and I was like, well,
wow.
It's not my problem.
Yeah.
And then I went on Sound Exchange's website, and I looked at it, and that's one of the things they do is collect from non-terrestrial radio, in other words, satellite radio. Satellite radio doesn't pay through BMI, they pay through Sound Exchange. Anyway, I ended up making like $10,000 off of this song again.
Wow.
Just because of this chain of relationships.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So that's why they say songwriting, publishing is the real estate of the music business, because you build a house. And then this person moves into your house and pays you rent for a while. Then they move out, and then another person moves in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when it works like that. And then there's the other 99% of the songs you write. I remember I had dinner with Dr. John at the Dakota once because I was opening for him. And we were talking about it. He goes, yeah, songs. I must have written 1 million of them, and I only made money off of 3.
Yeah.
And I was like, I feel you, brother.
You and I were talking about spotlighting a couple of songs in this hour. We played Sweeter World earlier. There's another song that you wanted to kind of throw a snippet of through this hour. What is that?
Okay, so this is a young woman I've been working with for 3 years. She's from the middle of nowhere in Kentucky, and her name is Jessie Key.
Yeah.
And the last time I had a publishing deal in Nashville, it just ran out a few months ago. But my publisher was friends with her publisher and hooked me up to write with her. She'd been sitting there with a publishing deal on Music Row, and they hear her voice. She said, well, you'll see what I mean. And the first thing they all think in Nashville, of course, because it's their job to make money, is, oh my God, she's going to be the next, country pop star with this big voice. But this girl doesn't own a record made after 1974, and she hates modern country pop music. I mean, she's not having it.
Yeah.
And so, of course, it being Nashville, she got a reputation for being difficult.
I thought you were going to say she got arrested.
Yeah, right. So I went in to write with her, and she's like, who have you written for? And I said, Etta James. She's like, whoa, okay. And so this is the first song we ever wrote. Now, I got her an offer from Big Machine Records, but the minute I left Nashville, they started talking to her behind my back and saying, yeah, you got to get rid of that guy. And, we're going to make you the next Carrie Underwood. And she's like, see ya. Yeah. Then I got her an audition with Warner Brothers. We went into Warner Brothers' office, just me and her, and the entire A&R staff and the president was sitting there. And they were like dancing while we were playing.
Wow.
She's that good.
Wow.
They were going and swearing in Nashville, and just like, oh my God. I leave town, they're going to make her an offer, and then 2 days later they're calling her up saying, listen, we got producers that we like to work with and writers that we like to work with, and she's like, see ya. So I'm working with this guy in Pittsburgh.
Are you saying that people went forthright in the music business?
Has started a label, and I got him to sign her. We have the record half done, then COVID hit, so we've been waiting to record the second half of the record. But this is the first song we ever wrote. Okay. So because of this song, we've gotten her 2 major label deals that she turned down.
Wow, okay.
Rightfully so.
I'm prone to wish when it's dreary like this. I had somebody away when the sky goes gray. Maybe it's the weather, maybe it's the weather that leads me to hate. I don't need sunshine, but sometimes, damn, I wish I had a rainy day man, rainy day man. No, I don't need forever
That's all you got.
or even tonight.
That, yeah.
She's amazing.
You know, as I'm listening to that, because you played that for me before, but it's been a long time since I heard it. You were talking about the blues before, and you know, winning a Grammy for the blues is like, however you artfully said that. But it's interesting. The blues is a very perplexing and frustrating thing for me because it seems I'm not a blues singer. I have elements of the blues, but I would never call myself a blues person, you know,
Right.
a blues man or a blues singer. I don't write blues songs.
No.
But one of the most fascinating and strange things to me about the blues, and I don't know how you feel about this, but you know, rock has a window. Rock has a ceiling. I mean, the ceiling's really high. You know, to be really good, you have to get over this level. Jazz does too. But to me, blues always has a very low ceiling of what's acceptable for blues fans, what they'll take. You know, it seems like they don't, to me, blues fans should expect more of blues artists. So
That is funny. I never thought about it that way, but yeah, that's definitely true.
it just
I
seems like
wonder
the
why that
expectations
is.
of blues artists aren't as high as other genres, and I don't know why, because the genre is so powerful and so moving,
Yeah.
and it's so consequential to me. But I've always I just wondered if you felt that kind of level of, do you need to, in order, when you do a blues record, doesn't need to hit the heights of something else of a different genre that you know that you would need to hit?
I think the main thing missing is the songwriting. It's like it's not considered part of the formula. You know, people think Stevie Ray Vaughan. This is what I think. People think Stevie Ray Vaughan was so huge because of his guitar playing, and it's like, well, there's other people who are in that ballpark. Maybe they're not as good, you know, but Stevie Ray Vaughanabies. But the reason Stevie Ray Vaughan, the mass audience, appealed to him, in my opinion, is because he had such great songs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because, I mean, with just the guitar playing alone, you could get to a certain level and connect with people who are super into guitar players.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But to reach, like the mom driving her kids to soccer or whatever, you got to have a caught in the crossfire. You got to have a story, just like any style of music. You got to have the songwriting, and I think that's what's often missing in blues. Why? I have no idea. This song is obviously a complete Otis Redding rip.
Yeah.
It's just, I thought of the idea. Okay, I'll tell you. I was driving to the session, and I was like, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are you going to do? And I did have I always have a notebook or something like that full of titles and ideas. But I was thinking about Bob Dylan's title of his song that had, everybody must get stoned. The title has nothing to do with the song. Rainy Day Women, number 1235, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I was like, the songwriter's mind is like, Rainy Day Women, Rainy Day Man. You know what I mean? I thought, Rainy Day Man, that's a really good title.
Yeah.
Now, what would that be about? And I Googled it, and it turns out Bonnie Raitt, James Taylor did it, Bonnie Raitt did it, maybe James wrote it, I don't know. It's called Rainy Day Man, but it wasn't a hit or nothing. Nobody knows the song. Do you even know the song?
I know the title of the song. Yeah.
Okay, but it wasn't
Yeah.
on the radio anymore.
Yeah.
So it's you can't copyright a title. It was ripe for the taking.
Yeah.
And then that's when we sat and talked about it. And I thought, what about this woman who's so desperate that it's like, you don't even have to love me. Just come over here, be my rainy day man. I'm that lonely and that desperate that I'll settle for that, and I accept that. And the desperate nature of that and the sadness of it, and that's what the song is about.
Yeah.
And then we wrote it in an hour and a half, maybe 2 tops. And I remember when it came to the chorus, and I was like, first, I just started doing that Otis thing, that Steve Cropper thing, dong, that arpeggiated chord thing, oh, da, 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 which a million Otis songs are like that. And then we came to the chorus, and I was like, what if I stop? And she just sat there and went, Dad, I wish I had. And it was so loud. I felt like that guy in the Memorex tape commercial. He was going back in his chair.
Right.
And remember, you asked me, what makes you decide to work with an artist? That moment right there in the middle of our first writing session, I had known her for an hour. She sang that, and I was like, you're the one.
Yeah.
And I've been working with her for 3 years for no money. 3 years. Count several writing trips, her coming up here, me going down there, recording at Terrarium. Oh, that's the other thing I was going to say, is that on this song, credit where credit is due, Noah Levy on drums, it's recorded at Terrarium, Ian Allison on bass, Jeff Victor on keyboards, and me on guitar, and then we added horns, Rich Manick and his buddies.
Yeah.
Did the horns. And
it's beautiful.
I couldn't ask for anything more.
I often think of the time that you and I wrote, we wrote 2 songs, or a song I brought and a song you had on New Year's Day. I think it was 1998. We went to your house and we wrote Soul of a Woman and Someone's Waiting for Me at Home. Those 2 songs. And I remember driving back going, I think those are the 2 best songs I've ever been involved in. I felt like I hit a different level that day. I don't know if it was because it was the new beginning of a new year, or I had never really done that with somebody.
I think those were both your titles.
No, Soul of a Woman was your title.
Really? I didn't remember that.
Yeah, Soul of a Woman was your title, and then we pieced it together, and Someone Waiting was my title, and I had about half of it, and then we pieced it together that day. But it strikes me interesting, as with the artist you were just talking about, and how much time you've spent with that artist for purely the passion of the process. There's something about that process that keeps you coming back, why you want to write songs, and that to me is interesting, because those are the things that people don't see. They only see and hear the finished product, but it's the percolation that's interesting when it's really
I think it's
hot.
interesting.
Yeah, it is.
But don't get me wrong. I think this girl's going to make money.
Yeah.
All right? And that's part of the inspiration too. Once I believe something, in something, I'm like a dog with a bone. You know what I mean? I fiercely advocate and work and do whatever it takes. Nothing, if she fails, if Jessie Key, we put that record out and nobody pays attention or anything like that, I still won't think that I was wrong. I will think it's because America is dumb. That is the studied arrogance. But you kind of have to have that in order to get through the craziness that it takes to.
Right. What a great thing for her to have as a producer, to have that opinion. America's dumb. If you don't get this, if you don't get these songs, you're dumb. You want that passion from as a producer.
As an artist, I think it's good to have someone believe in you like that. I didn't think that she was dumb for turning down Warner Brothers and Big Machine, even though financially for me, you know what I mean? I could have gone in with them and say, all right, it's I get a guarantee of 3 songs on the record. The rest of it you can make with your Music Row people or another producer and cut some kind of a deal. And that would be a more common way that business is done.
Yeah.
But she wasn't having it, and I supported her 1,000%.
Kevin, we just have a couple of minutes left. I want to just talk about, IPR in Minneapolis, you were a teacher there for a long time, and it was a source of income, but there's what is it about what is it about that job that was important for you to relay your knowledge to kids that wanted to be in the business you're in? Was there something that drove you to do that? What rewards came out of that?
Health benefits.
There you go.
No, it's not. I'm an accidental teacher. I never knew that I'd be good at it or thought that I would be good at it. And it's not a passion of mine. I would rather any day, and I'm sorry if this sounds rude, I would rather make a record than teach people how to make records.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people. And I salute those people who have this joy of sharing their knowledge. I like being in the studio making records, writing songs and making records. That's really that's what I like to do. But I had this opportunity and to get health benefits for me and my family. And then it turns out that I liked it. I was never super passionate about it, but I liked it. And if I'm going to do a job, I'm the kind of person where if I'm going to do a job, I'm going to do it 100%. Yeah. So I worked really hard, and my kids loved me, and I loved them. Yeah. But by the time I was done with it, I was really done with it. Yeah. It's just not who I am.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, it's been great just hanging out and talking like we do on the phone, every once in a while where things just go all over the place. But I think it's really interesting to hear, for other people to hear how you think, what you do, what goes into what you do as a record producer and all that kind of stuff. And, my friendship with you and all of our time, the gigs that we've done and writing has been really special to me.
Even the Tuesday nights?
Even the Tuesday nights. So,
I can't work with that.
I can't work with that.
Just to explain, that was the funniest thing anyone's ever said to me on stage. I started a song way too slow, and you let me go on for like a minute in this funereal pace. And then you came up behind me and whispered in my ear, I can't work with that. And I thought I was going to die laughing. That was the best. That was the best thing in the world that's ever happened to anybody.
Well, Kevin, you're going to be, you and I talked about, you're going to be contributing some tracks to this, one of the podcast episodes called Body of Work, and people will be able to hear your stuff on the podcast. And we also talked about you occasionally contributing some content live from the Kill Room, your studio. And I'm really looking forward as the podcast continues, who you decide to bring along. And so you can share that with everybody.
I'm ready.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for being the first guest on the Mick Sterling Experience podcast. It's an honor, my friend.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. Well, everybody, there you go. We did it. It's the first one. Thank you so much for checking in with us, and we hope you enjoy the show. There's going to be all kinds of shows that are happening on the podcast, and we will be notifying you on Facebook and all the social media platforms about new episodes. We'll be doing Sue Zellickson's going to have a show about cooking, and Brad McLemore's going to have a show called House and Music. I'll be doing interviews of different people. There's a show called The Relief Sessions, which is going to be about all the great charity work that happens in the state of Minnesota. So stick with us. We hope you enjoy the content, and thanks for being part of the first podcast. We'll see you again. Thanks, everybody.